Hi guys, welcome to this video. This is a tactical video about Eldar, or Craftworld Eldar I should specify, in 8th edition 40k, and this is my first tactical video regarding Eldar. However, I have been playing them for a fair few years now. I started back at the start of 6th edition, using the old 4th edition codex, and I basically played them on and off, here and there, right up until 7th edition. The 7th edition codex. I didn't really like the 7th edition codex, and I kind of fell out of love with the faction. So they basically were shelved throughout most of 7th. And when 8th started, when the rumours for 8th started coming out, I decided to pick them up again and try and start again. So one of the things I have done is basically repaint the army, touch up the paint jobs here and there, and basically make them look better. And I'm quite pleased with the way they're coming out. But enough of that. Let's get into the tactics here. So this is good old-fashioned unit review, and I'm going to look at Striking Scorpions first. Striking Scorpions are one of my favourite models. They look really good, especially these ones. These ones are the metal variant. So if I can get that to focus, but yeah, these are the metal versions. There we go. And they look kind of like Predator, which is always really cool. And I've tried to keep the basic aspect colours going through, but I have a black colour scheme for my Craftworld, so there we go. So Striking Scorpions then, they're a funny one, and they always have been. Generally speaking, they're usually quite overcosted. That is not true as of the Codex, fortunately. At the moment they cost 4 power for a group of 5, and you can pay an extra 3 power to up them up to a full 10-man squad, which is pretty good. Alternatively, they cost 14 points a model, which is not too bad. So that's 140 points basically for 10 of them. There's only 9 here, there's another one in the case. And obviously you get a free Exarch with that. And you know, if you get extra equipment, and then there's a little bit of variation you can do on the Exarch's equipment, which is quite nice. Okay, so your average Striking Scorpion has a stat line of 7-inch move, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, which is good, strength and toughness 3 because they're Eldar. They have 1 wound, and they have 2 attacks, which is nice. They're also leadership at 8, so better than average, and they have a 3-up save. So a bit like weaker Space Marines, but they get that extra attack, which is good. The Exarch is exactly the same, except he has an extra wound and an extra attack. Now, these guys come equipped with shuriken pistols and scorpion chainswords, which is +1 strength. Other than that, they are just a basic melee weapon, so 1 damage, no AP. The +1 strength means, of course, that they're attacking at strength 4, so for all intents and purposes, they are strength 4. So the only thing that's different from a Space Marine, really, is that they get an extra point leadership, they have 1 extra attack, and of course, they have 1 point less toughness. They do have 1 point of extra movement though, so slightly faster, but slightly squishier. Toughness 3 is not so bad in 8th edition because of the way the toughness woundings work. It still makes a difference, but honestly, it's not as much of a hindrance as it once was in some aspects. Generally speaking, anti-infantry weaponry is less effective in this edition, so toughness 3 kind of got a little buff overall. So the other things they come with is shuriken pistols. I'm not going to go over that. It's just a 12-inch shuriken catapult with 1 shot. It's pretty nice because obviously you can get that AP free on a 6 to wound. So it's the same as most Eldar really. Their shooting, even on the basic weapons, is very, very scary and potentially very powerful. So that's quite nice. They also come with plasma grenades or sunburst grenades, depending on whether you're using the Codex or the Index, but in this case it's plasma grenades. Don't count these out. They're strength 4, so the same as a shuriken pistol. Obviously shorter range, but only about half. The key thing here is they have an AP -1, and of course, as a grenade, it's a D6 number of shots. So if you're firing Overwatch, and of course they're in range for that, then using a plasma grenade is a great alternative to a shuriken pistol. You're going to get more mileage out of it. Having said that, even if you're close enough to use a grenade, I would always choose to use a grenade over a shuriken pistol, just because that -1 AP is really, really nice. So it's actually pretty good there. Okay, for other Wargear, the Exarch can take, he can replace his scorpion chainsword with a biting blade. Biting blade is +2 strength instead of just +1. It comes standard with a -1 AP and 2 damage. So that's actually pretty good. It means it's strength 5 with 3 attacks Each one of them is doing 2 damage, and he's always like lowering their armor save. So pretty good. Of course, the other extreme is that he can replace his shuriken pistol with a scorpion's claw. The scorpion claw is quite interesting because even though it replaces his pistol, it's basically got a shuriken catapult like grafted onto it. So as you can see, I've got a scorpion's claw in this Exarch right here. What that basically means is you're getting an extra shot straight away, which is pretty good. And of course, the claw is basically a power fist without the -1 to hit. So it's actually very effective. So D3 damage, -3 AP, and strength ×2. That basically means it's strength 6. Bear in mind, that's only 1 point better strength than the biting blade, but you're basically paying for the potential D3 damage, which I'd say 2 damage guaranteed is better than that for the most part, but still. And the extra -2 AP, as well as the extra shot, so not too bad. I should say the reason I have the claw on this Exarch is basically because I've always had this model the same it was. Most of this Eldar army was second-hand anyway, and I just like repainting it, that kind of thing. So, but I am a fan of the claw, and it used to be very good, and it's still very good. In the index it was less good, and the biting blade was better because it was so expensive. Whereas nowadays it's only 12 points. So when you factor in the other benefits, that's pretty good. The biting blade, by comparison, is 8 points. So if you're really hurting for points, then the biting blade is a good option. However, otherwise I would just say go with the scorpion's claw. It's lost any of the negatives, so you might as well. The other thing of equipment that they have is the Mandy Blasters, although you don't have to pay for these. Mandy Blasters are quite interesting. So at the beginning of every fight phase, that includes yours and the enemy's, you can pick a single enemy infantry unit within 1 inch of this unit, so basically someone you're in combat with. Bear in mind it says enemy infantry, so it only works on infantry. It doesn't work on like bikes or vehicles or monsters or anything like that. And what you do is you roll a d6 for each model in the unit. So blah, see here there's 9, so I'd roll 9d6. And if you get 6, the enemy unit suffers a mortal wound, which is pretty good. Bear in mind, if you are rolling 6d6, you can expect 1. With 9, I can expect about 1.5. So on average, you're probably going to get 1 mortal wound every time, even with a full squad of 10. However, there is potential for more there, and if you roll really well, then this can really swing things in your favour before the combat even starts. Remember, it happens even if you get charged, so that's quite good. In practice, I've actually had this work out pretty well. It usually shaves off a few models, or if they're particularly elite infantry, you know, it causes some hurt on them before the scorpions actually get to chop up. So it's just a little bit of extra damage and something you shouldn't really forget about. But you can't really rely on it as such. But all the same, it's actually a very good rule because you're getting those extra mortal wounds for nothing, basically, which is nice. Other special rules you have is Ancient Doom. Not even going to go over that, it's completely pointless. Don't think I've ever used that rule since it was invented in 6th edition. There's also Battle Focus, which is a little bit useful. Again, it's one of those things where I haven't really used it in 8th edition, so for those who don't know, Battle Focus is just the thing where if you run and shoot with an assault weapon, then you don't suffer the -1 to hit, so you can advance, I should say, and shoot an assault weapon. That's a standard rule. Normally that would be at a -1 to hit because you advanced, whereas the Eldar don't have that, which is quite nice. This only really applies to striking scorpions if you take the scorpion's claw, which means they can advance and he can shoot his weapon. But honestly, you're not really going to be doing that with striking scorpions, so for the most part it's going to do nothing for you, and so because of that, these are a decent candidate for making Yanari if you want to go like the whole Yanari thing. I don't personally, but you know, they're a decent option if you want to do that because you're not really losing anything. Okay, and they also have Masters of Stealth, which is just deep strike essentially. This is at the end of a movement phase, and of course you have to be more than 9 inches away from enemy models, but this can be quite useful. The good thing about this, of course, in all instances, is that your opponent doesn't know where you're going to deploy you can always, like, if you have one unit of these like I do, you can opt to put them in reserve first, which is quite nice, as your very first unit deployment, and then basically your opponent doesn't know where you're going and you can see where your opponent is going and deal with that accordingly. It's very nice to have, and something you're basically paying for with the Scorpions, so it's something you should probably consider using. There's no real penalties to using it. The only drawback with using Masters of Stealth is that if you took them for a counter-assault unit, or you needed them to fulfill that role, then using them in that is not good because you have to be 9 inches away from an enemy unit. Whereas otherwise, you could potentially move forward and get a closer charge on your turn, especially if you're going second. So if you wanted to use them as counter-assault, then that's the only time really I wouldn't use it. However, having said that, Scorpions are not the best counter-assault unit you can have for Eldar by a long shot. So you might want to consider other units for that role. But if this is your only assault unit you have and you want them to fill that role, then you could definitely do a lot worse. Okay, so the next thing they have is Shadow Strike, which is quite nice. On this you add 1 to hit rolls for attacks in this unit at target unit in cover. This applies to shooting and assault. So basically if the enemy is in cover, which a lot of the times they will be, depending on what you're aiming these guys at, you get +1 to hit, which is quite nice. So hitting on 2s with the Shuriken pistols and of course Sunburst Grenade or his Claw. And if you get into assault with them as well and they're in cover, then you're also getting the +1 to hit, which is very, very nice. Bear in mind that their entire unit needs to be in cover to count as being in cover. So in a situation where they've got a couple of models poking out of cover, that kind of thing, you'd have to roll it a few dice at a time and like kill those models first. If the opponent doesn't kill those models first, then you don't get the +1 to hit, but of course they don't get their +1 to armor. So it's basically ignore cover in some ways, because you know it's the same percentage on the dice that's making a difference. So it's actually quite nice to have. It's better than ignore cover, obviously, because it works in assault as well. So pretty good. The last thing is sustained attack. So this is the Exarch only. Basically, if he rolls a 6+ to hit, then he can immediately make another close combat attack using that same weapon. But those attacks can't generate additional attacks. So he's got 3 attacks base. If he's attacking something in cover, that's +1 to hit. So that's actually working on a 6 or a 5. Sorry, my cat is going crazy. So, you know, that's actually pretty good. On 3 dice, you basically get 1 extra attack if you're attacking something in cover, which is pretty good. What's especially good with this is if you combine it with one of the Warlock powers, Enhance, basically this adds another 1 to hit rolls in the fight phase. So what this basically means is you're getting +2 to your rolls, which again means you then getting extra attacks on a 4+, which is pretty good. So you can expect about 2 extra attacks there, which is quite nice. Even more so, if you combine this with a stratagem, Supreme Disdain for just 1 command point, that lets you basically attack again on a 6-up. So what this means is it actually applies to everyone in the unit as well, so it means all these guys are suddenly also getting extra attacks. So basically what this means is all of the guys in the unit are getting extra attacks on the 4-up, which is very, very nice. On top of that, the Exarch is getting 2 extra attacks for every 4-up he gets. Of course, this does cost a command point, and it also requires the enemy to be in cover, and of course, it also requires the Warlock power to go off. So it's quite hard to set up, but if you manage to set that up, that's suddenly a lot of attacks coming through for a fairly cheap thing. So that's actually pretty nice, and something worth considering. Okay, and beyond that, basically, you can just use the regular Craftworld the Craftworld abilities that you usually get. So that's enough about talking about the unit itself. How the hell do you use Striking Scorpions? I have seen a lot of people complain about Striking Scorpions and how they're weak and that kind of thing, and honestly they are. Like, the drawback of Eldar is that their units are not resilient unless they're designed to be. Eldar are very specialist, and everything has its own role. The problem with Striking Scorpions is, on the surface, they look like they're designed to deal with light infantry in close combat. It looks like their role, and to a certain extent it is, or at least it was. In 8th edition, the roles kind of changed. To deal with light infantry, or anything else in Assault for that matter, you've got things like Howling Banshees, you've got Shining Spears, and of course you've got Wraith Blades. And that's not including the big monstery things, that's just your basic melee units. You've even got Storm Guardians, which are much better against hordes of infantry than Striking Scorpions would be for less points, essentially. Even though they're designed to kill infantry with that mortal wound thing, they're designed to kill certain types of infantry, and these are the guys you send against the enemy Devastators. These are the guys you send against the enemy back line. And what's more, these are the guys who can operate completely on their own. They can work solo. They don't need support, which is quite nice. I would personally say, and this is what I prefer to do, if you've got the points, run a full squad of 10. Basically what this does is it makes the unit much more resilient, especially if you infiltrate them into cover, which is quite easy to do because it's based with their rules. That gives them all 2-up armor save. They're still toughness free, like I say, but it'll actually take quite a lot to deal with them. The enemy basically has to turn around and deal with them. And this is even better if you shove them on an objective that is unguarded, especially in your enemy's backline. Alternatively, they can go for line breaker. Generally speaking, though, the enemy will have units on an objective in a ruin or something like that, and these are the guys you want to deal with that. If they're high up on a tower, and it just happens to be higher than 9 inches, then there's nothing stopping these guys appearing right at the bottom of that tower, which is quite scary for your opponent because they'll be safe from the enemy shooting and they can just move up. Alternatively, they'll be in the next building over or something like that. Just because you can deploy just outside of 9 inches doesn't mean you have to get that close. It's actually much better to get as close as you can while staying in cover. More importantly is being within 12 inches, because then that first turn you come down, you can shoot. So you can sit in cover, you can shoot your shuriken pistols, or the Scorpion's Claw, and you're actually going to do some damage there, because don't forget you get that +1 to hit, and you know you get any 6s to wound, then you're ignoring a good portion of their armor save, which is quite nice. That's going to pick off a few here and there, and the kind of units you're going for, the Devastators and all, basically like things like Dark Reapers even, or Retributors for example. These kind of infantry, they suffer from losing even a single model. And again, that ties into the whole mortal wound thing from the Mandy Blasters. You know, every time you get that 6 to wound, it costs the enemy a lot, because, you know, they're losing effectively a whole model, which is actually quite expensive because they've had a lot of upgrades put on them, or they've got an expensive like heavy weapon on them, that kind of thing. Obviously they can't shoot when they're in combat, so that helps. They're a good unit to tie the enemy up with. But yeah, that first turn you don't need to worry about charging. The first turn should be, you get somewhere. Maybe it's an objective to score you a point that turn. Maybe it's just a really good blocking place to stop the enemy bringing on reinforcements. Or maybe you just want to get there and basically be a distraction. So take a few pot shots, whittle down the enemy slightly, make them nervous, just be behind the back line ready to cause some disruption, that kind of thing. On the next turn, you can move out and you can charge, because with a 7-inch move, you're basically closing most of the gap anyway, and then of course you've got decent charge options there. You can still shoot beforehand, and any kind of damage you cause is really going to disrupt the enemy. Now the unit can be expensive for this role, but if you're picking up objective points, if you're getting victory points, just from doing this, just from dropping in the backfield and like cutting down the enemy guns, which are hardest to reach, that kind of thing, the back line, that's actually worth the points. You can't think of 40k all the time as, oh, this unit didn't kill as many points as I paid for them. Because if you think that way, then yeah, some units are always going to seem like trash, and you're not really factoring in the full range of abilities or options open to you. Basically, you need to keep your eyes on the prize, and it doesn't really matter how many points you spend to achieve something, so long as you achieve it and that objective you've got leads to victory. So that's something to consider. And Scorpions are basically the unit that will win you games, even if they don't actually do anything, because they will port in somewhere, they'll get an objective, maybe they'll contest one, that kind of thing, or they'll just cause some kind of havoc in the backfield, and that's basically their job. Even if they don't shoot or attack anyone in the whole game, then they can just sit there and pick you up victory points, and there you go, you'll win. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. Now, one thing to bear in mind, and what I found with Scorpions is, I mentioned it before, with most Eldar units, they can't hold up very well themselves. And if you are attacked by a dedicated assault unit, you can basically expect your Scorpions to die. So what you really want to do, if you can, is charge the enemy before they charge you. So let's say the enemy peels off some kind of, I don't know, Thunderwolf Cavalry is a good option to deal with these. Now, one of the things you've got, which is good there, is that they've effectively taken one of their elite fast units, which could cause a lot of havoc to your other units, like shooting units, or weaker infantry that are designed to deal with other targets. They've taken that and they've peeled it away to deal with the Scorpions, okay? Now again, the Scorpions can kind of hold up a little bit, but thanks to their Mandy Blasters, no matter what they come up against, they're probably going to do a little bit of damage at least. They'll probably take down something in the unit. They won't wipe the unit in a lot of cases, but they'll do some damage. So if the Thunderwolf Cavalry charges them, you can expect to lose this unit. But hopefully they'll do a bit of damage to it first, and you've still taken them out of the fight effectively for 1 or 2 turns, which is really good. Now if you charge them first, getting to attack first is a big benefit, because then you actually get to bring your full power to bear. You get to do your Mandy Blasters, and of course you get to do all your attacks. And if you have somehow engineered that way with the Warlock and all that kind of thing, to get the bonuses, then, or the enemies in cover of course, then you can expect to actually put out a decent amount of damage and whittle down that unit quite a lot, so the retaliation isn't so bad. And remember, you only need like 1 model left over to hold an objective, and once they've done like something like that, just hide the guy. Hide him, get Line Breaker, you know, he's always going to be there, and it's going to be bloody annoying. So it's pretty good. On average, the Scorpions tend to do pretty well. Occasionally they have a game where they do horribly, but that's generally down to my rolling more than anything. For the most part they always do work, especially now that I use them the way I do. So one thing to consider is that you should be careful about what turn you bring them in. You don't necessarily need to bring them in turn 1. What I would personally say is, if the enemy seems to be swamping you and they have a unit that has, let's say they've cleared one of your objectives, as their elite unit has cleared the objective from you, has moved on to deal with other parts of your army because they have to, they don't just want to sit there. This is a common trick, and then they've like dropped a small unit of troops or something just behind, sit in that cover, hold the objective, maybe scouts or something like that. That's when you drop this unit in nearby, and then they could deal with those scouts, take that objective back. That's a good option if you need to use them to retaliate. Okay. Again, you could use them as counter-assault, but you don't really want to be using the Masters of Stealth rule for that. Alternatively, you can save them. So if there's no good places on the enemy side, turn 1, like there's no places they can actually drop in without being in the open or something like that, and there's not a good reason to do so, I would say save them. Because even if they come in on the last turn, it's still a point for Line Breaker. It's still potentially something that could seize an objective or something like that, especially if you roll well on the charge. But yeah, it's generally something where once the enemy is like overcommitted and they've come forward, that kind of thing, to deal with the rest of your army, so that they're trying to come towards you, you just pop these guys right in the backfield behind them, and suddenly they're surrounded in a way, but it's a nuisance and something they have to deal with. And I guarantee you'll have a lot more success using Scorpions if you do this. You don't need to bring them on the board at all, if that's how it plays out. I mean, generally speaking, you always would, of course. And to be honest, if they never got an opportunity to come in, that's okay too. You could do the same thing where the rest of your army, like say it's the end of the game, your opponent basically had a gun line, they just sat in the back and they never came forward. And you've basically had to go to them, you've got enough units forward by the end of the game to deal with them, then you can commit all your units forward and you can drop these guys in your back line to hold an objective right at the end of the game. It's an option there, it's flexible, and that's really good because you can put them where they're needed. And that's basically what they're for. They're to come in, they're to sit there, they're to basically just hold an objective, hopefully get you a couple of points, maybe more depending on what kind of mission you're playing. And, you know, take out the squishy units or just be bloody annoying. But yeah, that's basically it. Striking Scorpions, I do enjoy using them. To be honest, I use them in basically every game of Eldar I play at the moment. It's probably not going to change because they have a role to fulfill, and that's pretty good. It means I don't have to mess around with the command points, infiltrating units that aren't really designed to do that. I don't need to go for an alpha strike with these guys because that's not what they're for. Yeah, that's Striking Scorpions for you. So hopefully this video is informative, hopefully you found it useful, and of course hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, then remember to leave a like below. Don't forget, if you've got any comments or feedback, leave it below and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Otherwise, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more videos soon. Thanks for watching, see you next time.